Hello, my name is Codemaster Jamal, and welcome to my first devlog. I decided to take a break from the MMO part of my multiplayer game and focus on the open world aspect of it. Today I will show you how I created diversity and variation for my game by applying different color schemes to my 3D models. I'll admit that while I have been studying game design for quite some time, I am still roughly new to developing video games. Thus, I don't entirely know how to make an open world game, but this is my approach to making my game. So if you're interested in making an open world game of your own, or would like to know how to create different types of scenery, then perhaps my method or approach can help you along the way. Let's get right to it. I started off by creating an example scene in Blender. I added a plane mesh and then subdivided it into 4 quadrants. I then copied and pasted one tree model for each of the quadrants. Now this isn't the proper method for importing 3D models into a Blender scene. However, since I'm still new to the software, I couldn't remember the proper way to do so. Next, I removed the cameras and imported my 2D leaf textures that I created before I started recording this video. I placed a different leaf texture for each model to show the variation of trees I could create just by changing the textures. The whole point to diversity is that as you travel around the world, you come across different types of people, plants, and animals. Even the way how buildings are designed are different. This example can be compared and seen in our own world, so when you are designing an open world, it's nice to have a diversity of culture and landscape for your players to explore. Once I found something that looked good, I placed the camera into the scene and then set it to render. Rendering an image in Blender is probably the most time-consuming thing in the world, but as it was rendering, I realized that I accidentally left the lamps from the original Blender file into it. Once I removed the previous lamps from the scene and placed a new lamp, this is what I got. When I started to plan the look and design of my game, I went to a concept map I created years ago. This map is known as Junsei. Junsei is where the setting of my game will take place and is my take on what a Pokemon region would look like if it were based on the United States. The overall idea for making my game an open world is to incorporate different color schemes. A lot of the towns and cities are based on colors themselves, so it's pretty easy to assign color schemes to them based on their name. I started out by giving the starting town, Demi-town, the basic green color scheme that I started out with. Next I gave Blue City a blue color scheme. Then there was Rocket City, which I gave a purple color scheme because a poison type generator was there originally. I also gave Magnamon City a yellow color scheme for the same reason. Rojo Town gets a red color scheme because Rojo means red in Spanish. As for the rest of the towns and cities, I chose similar colors because I knew that some schemes would have to repeat throughout the region. I wanted blue to repeat the most throughout the region because the color blue is actually very important to the plot of the game. I chose pink as a color scheme for Granite City because it's supposed to be the last stop on your journey throughout Junsei, and I wanted to use a theme that wouldn't be as common as the others. Other than that, the color schemes for the rest of the places weren't too important, especially not to the game's story. Aside from the major cities I just mentioned, any of the other towns' color schemes can change at any point because their color scheme isn't necessarily too important to the game. Once I figured out what color schemes I was going to use for each area, it was time to move on to designing the different tiles I would be using. In order to edit my model's textures, I needed to export the UV layout from Blender to Krita. The basic idea is that you model the leaves in Blender and then use Krita or GIMP or Photoshop to paint a texture on top of it. Blender reads the UV map and knows where the texture is supposed to be on the model. As long as you stay within the lines of the UV map, your texture is going to look fine. Next, I needed to finish picking the colors I needed for my color schemes. I used the colors I picked on the map and followed the same dark to light flow that I used on my original 3D models. The first set of colors are what I used for the real world. I wanted to pick color schemes that were more close to the natural world. The second set of colors are for what I call the other side of the real world. The other side of the real world is an alternate virtual world where players are allowed to travel back and forth. The virtual world's color schemes are meant to be as wacky or bizarre as possible. For example, I made sure one of the themes would remind you of the Matrix. I also had the idea for a cotton candy themed forest, and a few other things. Then, when you're painting your leaves, the trick is to use the darker colors first, and then stack the lighter colors on top. You can do this in layers if you want. You're going to want to fill out the UV map as much as possible. For my style, I prefer to pick brushes that are similar to leaves, but not actual leaves themselves. This gives my 3D models a more cartoonish look by not mimicking exactly what something looks like in nature. Just a little something I picked up from doing pixel art over the years. Also, when you pick a brush, it's best to use a brush with a bit of transparency. All my brushes are just Photoshop brushes that I load into Krita. You can find several leaf brushes on deviantArt.com and on brushcheesy.com. I'll include a link to the tutorial I used to make my 3D models somewhere in the video. The video I mentioned uses 3ds Maya and Photoshop, but you should do just fine with Blender and Krita. So now we'll just head over to Unity and apply the textures to materials for our 3D models. Finally, we are going to import our textures into Unity and apply them to our 3D models. I started off by loading one of my sycamore tree prefabs into the scene. I then changed the settings to my yellow sycamore leaves texture to turn the alpha transparency on. I made the wrap mode clamp and set the filter mode to no filter with a max size of 512 by 512. I usually apply this to all my textures. Next, make a new material and set the shader to nature tree soft occlusion leaves and load the texture in. As you can see, I messed up a bit when I was painting the texture the first time. You can see the branches on my model. You don't want that. You want your tree to be full so that you can't see the branches. Finally, I altered the shader settings to give my tree that nice vibrant look. Depending on how you want the lighting for your game, you may have to adjust those settings to your liking and see what works best for you. If you're doing more than one texture, you would repeat this process for every texture you want in your game. At this point, making your game becomes a tedious massacre because you have to repeat the exact same action over and over again for each and every single 3D model. This is why I've always wanted an assistant. It's not that it's a hard thing to do, but you have to do a lot of the same things repetitively if you want to create a game with a lot of great features. When you're done, all that's left is to load the Unity prefabs into your terrain editor and start producing trees across your terrain. And there you have it, you start to build an open world. Already the game looks more diverse and interesting. It would take a lot more than that to make an open world, but there's still much more I need to do before I am finished designing my world. I gave my game a test run, and this is how it looks. You may notice that a few things are similar to Jimmy Vegas's RPG tutorials. That's because I decided to let them in, but I just needed a first-person camera to show you guys what it looks like more in-game. Anyhow, this brings to the end of my video. If you made it this far, thank you, I really appreciate it. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you again. Till next time, this is Codemaster Jamal, and I'm signing out.